This is update for January 27, 2023, day 338 of the war and of the date update. I'm gonna start actually with the Russian situation in terms of energy exports to the world. So I just came across interesting chart that I would like to share with you. So this is our main importers or buyers of Russian hydrocarbons, basically natural gas and crude oil. So as you can see, even right now, and this is for the period of basically 1 week from 16th of January till 22nd of January. So as you can see, the leading buyer is still European Union. This means yes in Russian, which means European Union. Then the second one, sending basically buying worth of slightly shy of 700 million euros. So everything is in million of euros. So as you can see, Europe as a whole is still leading buyer of Russian hydrocarbon, basically energy resources in a simple way. Then the number two is China at 600 million. Then India, as you can see, quite sort of behind with 200. Turkey, and then South Korea, which actually I was surprised, didn't realize that. So let's actually look in terms of the structure, who buys what essentially. So the black one is crude oil via pipeline. So as you can see, China is buying quite a bit of crude oil by direct pipeline. Oops, sorry. And then European Union is very clear. There's that Druzhba pipeline that everybody knows, so that's not surprise. But actually, as you can see, uh, China is actually buying almost more crude by pipeline versus the seaborne. So the red one is crude seaborne, crude oil seaborne. So so this is the if there are some basically views that this can be disrupted, but as you can see, this black one you essentially cannot disrupt because it's essentially a straight line from Russia to China. That's extremely hard to interfere with, let's put this way. Also coal, the green one is coal. So as you can see, China is buying quite a bit of Russian coal, which is also mostly delivered by railroad. So as you can see, the direct link, not through the sea or ocean, is quite significant. And then this light violet is a natural gas via pipeline. So there is that pipeline that I mentioned that supplies, I believe it was 15 billion cubic meters. But that I mentioned this before. That's essentially break-even sales for Russia, or maybe even sort of negative if you really analyze it. So this is we looked at China. With India, situation is much more simple. So most of it is seaborne, as you can see, crude oil and some coal, which again also seaborne here in this case. With Turkey, as you can see, coal is actually a big part of the supply there. There's also natural gas, and then processed basically crude oil, essentially the sort of derivatives of the crude oil, which what I mean by that, gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, etc., gas oil, and things of that nature. So that's, as you can see, this dark violet color. And then South Korea, again, crude oil by the sea, and then um, coal. As you can see, there's a lot of actually coal being used in the world, which is actually, in a way, blowback and really the the disaster that the current energy policies is, and it's a direct result of those disasters. Efforts that being done in the, I don't know, past I would say, at least 10 years. Was trying to build this alternative energy that didn't work out, and as a result, you have a lot of coal, which is, to be fair, is extremely dirty, much dirtier than, let's say, natural gas, which is essentially clean, almost perfect, but there is a problem with it as well. I do hope tomorrow to make actually this video about sort of energy and electric vehicle, basically kind of like a summary overview of the whole situation, where we are, and, and potential passes where we're heading with all of this, let's say, disaster that's happening. So now let's look at the European Union. So as you can see, a significant portion of it is this dark violet, which is, as I said, derivatives or distillates, to use the sort of, let's say, professional sort of slang. But in a simple way, as I said before, this is products of the processing crude oil, which again, gasoline, jet fuel, diesel fuel. There's many more there. And so the importance of this is that this is, well, relatively high value add. So basically there are more profit, there's more margin in these products. So this is where, if you look at this is where Russia makes quite a bit of money in this dark violet color. And that is actually going to be, I think, stopping starting February 5th, because there is a plan to stop purchases of Russian, could say, derivatives of the crude oil processing, and basically diesel and gasoline. So remains to be seen how this is going to play out with the market. But initially, there probably will not be so much a shock, just because traders in Europe and just in general in the West, they are buying quite, they're building up inventory in expectation of this. So this will smooth sort of initial shock for some time, but how long it's going to play out, let's say in a month or 2 months, that's quite a bit of a question. Really will depend on the path of the economy and what's going on with the economy in the West. And that is going to be really driven by the interest rates. So potentially there are two sort of options. One is a big blow up into the summer, let's say April, May, June. The prices are going to really skyrocket if economy is working sort of in full force in the US and Europe. And I mean, Europe maybe like in sort of half force. Still, let's say things don't deteriorate from where we are right now. Let's put it this way, because demand is obviously seasonal and and it peaks, I believe, in June. And so, at least from maybe not so much demand, but in terms of purchasing activity, that picks out in June. So again, that could be big spike, and especially since US SPR is so low, and really getting to the point of where it actually needs to be refilled, not sort of depleted. There is a big chance of high energy prices this summer. The other option is the economy starts to really deteriorate significantly in the West, and that will obviously put the lid on the increase in prices, but they're not going to go down significantly either. So they're just going to remain where they are right now. Could be like down 10%, maybe even 20%, but because the economy deteriorates, it's going to be felt. So if you look because it's all about sort of relative situation, because the rest will be sinking so much more than energy. So it's effectively, it kind of works like as if this is going to be a huge increase in energy prices. So again, it's going to be painful. That's just the point of it. What's going to happen. Then let's look at another portion. So as you can see, Europe is still importing some natural gas by pipeline. This is going to be pretty much done soon. But there is sort of irony of it. Then it started importing from Russia using LNG, so basically liquefied natural gas from Russia. And as you can see, this is the light, I don't know what's called, like turquoise color. Um, this is actually almost bigger now than this light violet, which basically what you have is, you take from one pocket and you put it into another pocket, but the situation remains the same. Then looks like Europe is still buying a little bit crude oil using railroad, this orange, and then obviously there is a pipeline. So as you can see, um, despite all of these talks, actually the major suppliers of sort of financial resources to Russia is still Europe. Even right now, after stopping buying and all of that, that this is sort of like kind of like your sort of fresh reality. What's really happening? Yes, we spoke about China being big buyer and so on, in India, but really, Europe is number one, and this goes again back to the failed energy policies. It's not Russia's sort of fault. It's really the root cause is in Europe. And until it changes there in Europe, Russia will be sort of gaining and sort of basically taking advantage of the situation, because it's not that Russia is creating it, it's being created in Europe, and then Russia just takes advantage of their situation that's being created sort of like for Russia to take advantage. So this is just kind of like fresh look or more updated look on what's going on with Russian energy exports. Then so I get email from the viewer uh, that sort of was that email, basically this article talking about the Hungarian president Orban, and talking that the West is at war with Russia, and that Ukraine is going to be a wreck. Um, so I just want to explain what's really happening, because I don't think this is correct. I would say I disagree with that statement. So first of all, is Russia and China is at war with the West. That's where sort of the sort of initiative, right, comes from. So they attacking West because they feel that the West is weak, and they actually, and then if we do another iteration drill down of what's happening, is the root cause of that is that the West is at war with itself. And so again, then Russia and China, and let's say Iran, but Iran is not the major force there. They see that and they take advantage of the situation that's being presented by the West to China and Russia. And so they're attacking. It's in a way like, if you like, good analogy would be, if you have a weak immune system, there's a lot of viruses around all of us, like billions, or I don't know, maybe trillions of those. But they don't harm us because immune system works, and it basically destroys harmful viruses most of the time. And if your immune system really great, it works really perfectly and you're fine. Your immune system doesn't work well, or it starts to crack, more and more viruses are able to sort of attack you successfully and basically take advantage of your sort of body and so on, right? So this is exactly the same situation. And think about China and Russia as the viruses that are able to attack because the West is, as I said, at war with itself. And sort of related, maybe not exactly related, and then about Ukraine being wrecked and also and all of that. So that is, I would say, I would agree from a Russian perspective, the best strategy is to create like sort of like no man's land out of Ukraine, basically like one big huge battlefield, and everything's destroyed. And so in a way, that's kind of like a strategy. Okay, we cannot get it, Ukraine, then let's destroy it so the West doesn't get it. So that's just, but that's fair, very logical. This is not surprise. Um, Ukraine has been in this position during World War II because it was basically a battlefield between Germany and the Soviet Union, and was completely ravaged by that war. This happened to Ukraine in the past when, at the end of the 17th century, there is even like officially the period in Ukrainian history called the Ruin, which again a result of the wars between Russia and, let's call it, West, or what of that time. Let's put this way. Where again Ukraine was fighting for its independence and failed in that fight, and the result was complete disaster for Ukraine. So in a way, there, as they say, history rhymes, and in many ways, um, you know, this is another iteration, another opportunity where it can go really bad or it can go really well for Ukraine. Everything is in the hands of uh, Ukrainian people, Ukrainian citizens, and really will depend on them how it will go. So far, that's why I'm always highlighting that current Ukrainian leadership is making everything possible that this scenario will go in the negative direction, and basically blocking an opportunity for Ukraine to go into sort of successful path. And that's why in some ways the Ukrainian leadership is the most dangerous thing for Ukraine, like much more dangerous than Russia itself. Um, so then I would like to mention another situation that's developing in the US that will affect Ukraine. So if you probably know, there is a, a slim majority in the lower chamber of the US Parliament that's by Republican Party. And so in Republican Party, there is different sort of factions. Majority of it was sort of supportive of Ukraine, and realizing that this is really the war. It's not the war between Ukraine and Russia. It's really Russia's attack on the West. Um, However, there is part, a very small one in the Republican Party, that's essentially, um, I would say, siding with the Russia, and so it actually gained, and it actually gained uh, effective control of the entire sort of representation in the U.S. Parliament by first blocking election of the head of the lower chamber from the Republican Party, and making condition, which looks like they are secret, but it looks like that's what I want to explain. They secret, but I think that that's becoming more and more clear that the agreement is that Republican Party will vote eventually to uh, significantly reduce support to Ukraine. Not right now, but let's say in 6 months, toward the basically probably for the next budget, U.S. budget, which I think starts on the October 1st. So there will be some kind of negotiation of that budget sometime in the summer. So probably around that time there will be attempt to significantly reduce or even eliminate support for Ukraine. And that's really the danger for Ukraine. And that's a partially problem that was created by Ukrainian leadership that actually uh, blindly sided with one party in the US and become associated with one party in the US, and in a way, basically putting all bets in sort of all, well, what is called all eggs in one basket. And so, and the problem is that even those, let's say, senators and representatives who were supportive of Ukraine in the Republican Party, their hands in a way tied up as a result of this behavior of Ukrainian leadership. Um, so that's really a big challenge. That's not. This is not imminent. That's not going to be in 2 months or 3 months. But sometime in the summer, this can present as a real problem, and we may see actually big problem overall for Ukraine at that time is because um, Ukraine will get exhausted in terms of its own resources, and by that I mean military resources, including human resources, soldiers on the front line, because this is going to be war of attrition. But at that time, losses are going to be probably pushing 100,000, maybe 110, 120, and by that I mean dead on the Ukrainian side, and let's say this is on Russian. Let's say it stays more or less the same, so it'll be the same on the Russian side. But for Russia, they can afford it. At that point in Ukraine, this would be probably quite a bit of a crisis. Plus, you losing support or significant support from the U.S. And that's really going to be creating big problem and crisis in Ukraine. So this is not happening soon, but this is if things are not changed, this is where the sort of ship is heading over the long run. And unfortunately, current Ukrainian leadership will sort of, I would say, drive ship in that exactly in that direction. So that's just a big concern and big problem. Now let's actually switch to Ukraine. There were no new Russian missile attacks against Ukraine infrastructure, but Ukraine, the infrastructure is in pretty terrible shape. However, still alive as one unified system, which is actually in some ways pretty remarkable, given how many attacks that the system is still exists. Yes, it's in coma, as I said, and I'll repeat that, but it's still impressive that it still basically did not disintegrate despite so many attacks and damages. Now let's actually walk through the front line, and we're gonna do it in a clockwise fashion as always, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border is more or less quiet. There's not much of sort of escalation there. Let's jump to the North Luhansk front line. Things here are actually pretty quiet here today. And I would say there's general tendency, as like if summarize over, looking at this section of the front line, is that uh, it's getting quieter overall, with Russian side having initiative. So they sporadically do attacks that don't lead to anything, and so but overall, it's just the trend is to sort of, becoming stable and sort of relatively quiet section of the front line. I'm not saying that this means that there will be no offensive here or anything. It's impossible to predict yet where a Russian command will launch that offensive. But I would say this area would be the least promising for the Russian side, but least promising in terms of the opportunities. But in terms of it might be actually promising in terms of the quick victories that doesn't lead to anything. Basically, clearing up again this area all the way to a skill river, right? So the whole thing, and maybe even trying to capture Kupiansk as a bridgehead. So that's this quick victory is totally possible, but basically that will lead to expenditure of all of those accumulated resources that Russia has been accumulating since end of September for the offensive, and then you're done. And you really need to do like large scale new mobilization in Russia, and it may, it's politically difficult choice at this point. I mean, there is always stealth mobilization of small scale, but if you need another, at that point, you probably will need like, let's say, 600, 700,000 soldiers. It will affect society. And so that's, in a way, Russian command, Russian leadership also facing difficult sort of choice. If they launch this offensive and doesn't lead to any meaningful, like really strategic victory, just let's say it's going to be tactical victory, such as what I described here. Just like, okay, well, they capture this whole area up to a skill river. Just tactical victory doesn't lead to anything. Uh, and then you basically naked. I'm talking about the Russian side. Um, so that's going to be a very difficult situation for Russia as well at that point. So in many ways, that's what I'm saying. The both sides are becoming really exhausted, and I would say eventually heading to their 1917 moments. It's just who's gonna get there faster, sooner. It's hard to predict. I would say just Ukraine probably will get there sooner, just because of the size of the country and amount of resources. But I could be totally wrong. Okay, now let's move south. Let's see what's going on in the North Donbass front line, which is the most dangerous for Ukrainian army, and where the situation is really the worst overall. So Wagner mercenaries, they continuing their attacks in this sort of northern sector of the or north of Bahmut. No advances, but sort of that's part of the how it works. Um, However, in the south, they slowly moving closer to this village Ivanivske, which is critical, as I mentioned before. If they get sort of really on the outskirts of it, or even let's say capture, the situation in Bakhmut becomes essentially critical, and it's going to be really just a question of time before it's lost. So, but as you can see, they moved another, let's say, 1 or 2 kilometers there, and so they becoming step closer to that goal, um, and so the situation continues to develop in a negative way, and I mentioned this before. The problem is that Ukrainian command, and it's really about Ukrainian political leadership, does not have strategic answer to Wagner organization, um, and so this sort of disaster will continue, sort of growing and developing because there is no answer. Oh, and one more correction: I mentioned that Azov is in the south. It's actually operating this third brigade, which was named Azov, but it's, I would say, fake Azov. It's operating here in Bakhmut, which is, as you can imagine, no surprise, because Ukrainian command is trying to sort of to plug the hole with by throwing whatever they have. So in other words, instead of actually really solving the problem, they just throwing more and more resources which they don't have to plug this, and basically you're throwing more and more resources into black hole. Eventually, you run out of those resources, and things will be like falling like domino very quickly. And that's the long term sort of. This is the problem on long term sort of horizon here overall. Um, so now let's look at what's going on central Donbass front line. Things here, like broken record. Let's put this way. So Russian troops attacking out of the Spissky salient near Marinka without essentially any success. And again, I want to contrast this with Magner Group, which is this is Soviet army attacking, and it's unprofessional, inept, and unmotivated, and so you see no results. They just hitting the wall with their head and basically destroying their head slowly but surely. The situation here in Vuhledar so far, it looks like also this Russian tactical offensive fizzled out again. So let's call it like the second battle of Vuhledar. Basically, Russian side did not manage to capture it. I'm not. They may throw again resources at it, and who knows what's gonna happen. But so far, they blocked down here, and they again testing the water along this road, trying to find you know weak point so far, and but so far without success. So this is again goes back to this inept Russian command, like Soviet style. This is the basically the worst place to attack, and yet they exactly do that. So this is again, as I said, just shows you that if you have sort of Soviet army versus Soviet army, the situation is stalemate. Yeah, there are like significant human losses, and Ukraine cannot sustain even that situation over long run. But that just basically um, Ukraine has more time in this situation to change things in its favor. There's more flexibility, more opportunity. Unlike when there are Wagner mercenaries, and that thing is really difficult for Ukraine. And then just quickly summarizing situation on the Zaporizhya front line, it's quiet right now for now. I believe those attacks were just probing attacks, and we basically Russian command is trying to understand right now where really to launch main offensive, whether it's gonna be here in Zaporizhia, uh, and if they fail to capture Vuhledar, that really means that they cannot go there. So again, then they will try to shift everything to sort of more closer here to Dnipro River area, where they initially had a little bit of success. The Ukrainian defensive forces are much thinner here, and if they will amass enough troops, they may just ram through those. But we'll see what happens. There's, as I said, at the same time, there's still sort of opportunity in North Lugansk for the Russian command, and remains to be seen because they have two basically options. One is quick and dirty that leads to nowhere, tactical victory just for propaganda purposes for TV. They capture this basically area towards the Skill River, maybe even capture Kupiansk as a bridgehead on the other side, and then it's stalemate. They fizzle out. They waste all of their resources without really achieving any strategic success. Here, it's much more riskier, but they may actually, if they really penetrate here, and they may create really chaos and really like this completely dangerous situation for Ukraine, where they can actually create strategic defeat for Ukrainian army. Especially if they go all the way up north to Dnipro, which is between Zaporizhia and Dnipro. I think it's just roughly 70 kilometers, so it's not far. And this is kind of like in a way hub that connects, let's say, hub in this, let's say, central and southern Ukraine that connects this eastern and western banks of the river. And if it's threatened, I'm not even saying they're not going to capture it, but if they threaten it, and let's say they get Pavlograd, this really can create disaster just from all perspective for Ukrainian side. So again, this is you never know how the Soviet generals in the Russian command will decide. But this is going to be much more, dangerous situation for Ukrainian side if they choose to do so. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.